If you are not legally protected in your business, you are leaving money on the table. Hey, I get it. The legal side of business can feel intimidating, but the good news is it doesn't have to be. If you want to build your business on a strong foundation, and if you want to know that your rights are protected when the unexpected happens with a client or a customer, then it's time to get legally protected. This means no more using free contracts that you downloaded off of the internet. This means partnering with a law firm that actually believes in your vision and can help you achieve it. This means legally protecting your brand so that no one can steal your good ideas. There are a lot of ways to grow and scale, but if you want to grow a strong business, it's time to get legally protected. If you're listening and resonating with this, then my signature service, the Legal Upgrade, just might be perfect for you. The Legal Upgrade is a straightforward, structured process to give your business the legal protection that it needs to thrive. Click the link in the show notes and schedule a call with me today. Hello and welcome to the Legal Upgrade Podcast. I'm your host, licensed attorney Christian Hammond. This podcast breaks down the legal side of business to reveal key legal strategies that can help you take your business to the next level. Please note that none of the following is legal, tax, investment, financial, or medical advice. Without further ado, let's get into the show. Is your real life story better than fiction? Have you ever thought of selling the rights to your life story to be made into a movie, musical, or book? That is what we're going to be talking about today. And if you are new here, welcome. My name is Christian Hammond. I'm a licensed trademark attorney based in Washington, D.C., and serving clients worldwide. And we usually talk about things that are strictly related to your business in this podcast, but we are going to be stepping a little outside of that today to talk about some intellectual property rights that are a little more personal, specifically the rights to your life story. And many business owners have very interesting life stories, and your business may or may not be a big part of that, just kind of depending on how things unfolded. But I think this is such an interesting topic, and that's why we are going to be talking about it today. And so something that I've just been thinking about recently is the fact that true stories are big business. The movie The Wolf of Wall Street did $400 million in revenue. The musical Hamilton, which you've probably heard of unless you've been living under a rock since 2020, but the musical Hamilton has done over $1 billion worldwide. And the Netflix series Inventing Anna is one of their number one English language TV shows ever as far as viewership. So true stories based on true stories, inspired by true stories, are actually really big business. And yes, the subjects of these stories can get paid. They can get paid by movie studios, by those who are interested in taking their real life story and turning it into something commercial, turning it into something for entertainment audiences. And so that's a really interesting idea, especially if you're out there and you've maybe people have told you have a really interesting story. Maybe people have told you, hey, your life could be a movie. So today we're talking about 4 things to consider, 4 things to be aware of when thinking about negotiating a deal for the rights to your life story. And this is a really good time to break out a pen and paper, break out your iPad, break out whatever you want to take notes on, because here we go with 4 things to think about if you are negotiating or thinking about negotiating the rights to your life story. Now, the first thing to consider, the first thing to know is that you don't have to be famous to have a life story worth telling. You do not need to be famous to have a life story that potentially has a lot of commercial value. I'm thinking about movies like Erin Brockovich, The Pursuit of Happyness, Saving Private Ryan. Hey, thank you. I see the hearts throwing in the chat. Welcome. Hello, Carolyn. So you don't have to be famous to have a life story that is worth telling. Again, these movies like Erin Brockovich, Saving Private Ryan, The Pursuit of Happyness, you probably had never heard of the subjects of those movies before you actually went to go see the movie. So you don't have to be famous to have a life story that could be a blockbuster. You don't have to be famous to have a life story that could be made into a multi-million-dollar film. So that's the first thing. And I think that's a misconception. You might think, oh, I would need to be famous or notable or historically significant. Not at all. So the second point we're going to talk about is what negotiating power do you have and what negotiating power do you not have when you are negotiating a life story deal or a life rights deal? And I think the really big myth here is that someone would need permission in order to use your life story. And that is actually not true. So somebody else could write a book about you, make your life into a movie, make your life into a musical, make your life into the subject of a true crime podcast. People can use the details of your life without your permission. And that is because facts are not copyrightable. Pure facts, pure history is not something that can be copyrighted. Facts, history are in the public domain and they can be used by anyone. Nobody owns the facts. And while the facts of your life might feel really personal, and in fact they are, the truth is that the bare facts are not subject to copyright. They're not owned by anyone. They're in the public domain. So the year you were born, the jobs you've had, who you've married, how many times you've been married, your children, your relationships, the highs and the lows, the trials and the travails, the hard facts of you had this job in this year and you got fired in this year and you made $1 million in that year, the hard, raw facts of your life, personal as they may be, are not protected under copyright law, which means that anybody can take those raw facts and make them into a book, movie, musical, etc. And that really surprises people because I think it's a really commonly held myth that, well, wouldn't they need my permission? Don't they need my permission to make a story based on my life? And no, they don't. They don't need your permission. So when you go to negotiate these type of deals, the first thing to know is that there's actually no such thing as life story rights. It's kind of a misnomer. It's this term that we've made up to try to illustrate this concept, but there's no law about it on any books. There's no law about life story rights. So when you go to negotiate these deals, what you're not actually negotiating is whether or not they can use the facts of your life, because that's already a given actually under copyright law. But there are other levers that you can pull. There are other negotiating points that you have to offer. There are cards that you have to play to just really demonstrate the value of what you have to offer and to negotiate to be paid for that value. But because of this reality around copyright law, this is why some people are paid for their life story and some people are not. So for the Netflix show Inventing Anna, according to news reporting, Anna Sorokin, who is the real life person who inspired that TV series, she was paid, according to news reporting, a bit over $300,000 by Netflix for the rights to use her life for that TV series. Another example is Jordan Belfort, who is the real life subject of the movie The Wolf of Wall Street. He reportedly was, by the time it was all said and done, paid a little over $1 million for his involvement in the film. Contrast that to other movies like House of Gucci and Social Network, who did not pay the subjects of those films anything. So some people get paid, some people do not. And I think that's why it's key to understand what negotiating points you do have and what negotiating points you don't have. So we've talked about what you don't have, which is basically you can't really credibly say, oh, well, if you don't do what I want, you can't make the movie without me. You can't really credibly say that because, again, the hard facts of your life, the true, real details, that's in the public domain. So that's not necessarily the credible argument you want to go with. Now, there are several very valuable things that you do have to offer in these types of negotiations. And the ones I want to talk about are permission, access, and exclusivity. When you are considering selling your life rights, while you might not be able to say, oh, I own a copyright, because that's not really a thing. Now, if you decide to write a memoir about your life, you would own the copyright in that memoir, that book that has been published. And so if you yourself take some creative initiative and you write a screenplay, you write a book, you record a podcast, that's a completely different thing, and there is copyright ownership in those things. But I'm talking about the situation where you have not done that. You've just been living your life, and for whatever reason, somebody else has taken notice. That's the situation I'm talking about. And in this situation, what you have to offer, or three things you have to offer, are permission, access, and exclusivity. Now, I just said that they don't technically need your permission to take your life story and make it into an entertainment piece, right? While that is true, the other thing that is true is that nobody ever wants to end up in a lawsuit. And real life, based on real life, inspired by real life, movies, musicals, books, etc., are often the subject of lawsuits. So if you are willing to sign something promising not to sue, that is actually worth something in real dollars. Your promise not to sue the movie studio, etc., that is actually worth something in real dollars. That is quantifiable. That has quantifiable value. And in fact, if you end up negotiating one of these deals, at some point in that contract will probably be a pretty long section. It might be called waiver, it might be called release, but it'll be a pretty long section in which you are saying, I agree not to sue for copyright infringement, right of publicity, right to privacy, tort reasons, defamation, on and on and on and on and on. A laundry list of reasons why you are agreeing not to sue. Could be called a waiver, could be called a release. But that is something that has quantifiable financial value. Because even if you technically have the right to do something, that doesn't mean there might not be a fight about it later. And nobody wants to use money that they expected to be profit on a lawsuit. So if you are willing to say, hey, I'm actually giving you permission to use my life story and I'm committing not to sue you after the fact, that actually has financial value. So that is the first prong of permission. The second thing you have to offer potentially is access. So on one hand, the facts of your life, and to the extent that they are available and easily discoverable, that's in the public domain. There's no copyright protection for that. Anyone can use that. But you probably have access to facts, documents, and property that is not easily accessible, that would enhance the story, that would contribute to the story, that could make it that much more compelling. For example, maybe you have personal diaries, family heirlooms, letters, personal facts, personal documents, things that are not easy to find, things that you and only you have access to. Or maybe someone's approaching you for the rights to make a story about one of your ancestors, your great-grandparent, your great-great-grandparent, and only you have certain family heirlooms or family letters. These are things that could greatly enhance the story. These are things that could be very valuable. And other valuable things are interviews with you personally, and also you giving permission for them to interview your family members, you giving permission for them to interview your friends, because your family members and your friends are likely going to be more willing to give those interviews if they know that this movie or this, project has your blessing. So that's the second thing you offer. You can offer access to those hard to find facts, access to people who maybe wouldn't accept the interview unless you blessed it and said it was okay. And the third thing that you potentially have to offer to someone who is looking to buy the rights to your life story is exclusivity. And because that's a part of protecting their investment. Why would they pay you for the rights to your life story if you're going to shop that around to any and everybody else, right? So if you're willing to agree to exclusivity, if you're willing to agree to only interview with them, to only give access, again, to those documents, those facts, those family heirlooms, if you're only going to give access to them, that is actually very valuable. So, those are three things: permission, access, and exclusivity that have concrete, sometimes even quantifiable financial value. And those are things that you have to offer in these types of negotiations when you are thinking about selling the rights to your life story. Now, the third thing we're going to talk about, we've talked about what you have to offer. We've talked about the fact that you don't have to be famous to have a life story worth telling, or a life story that could turn into a very successful blockbuster. And the third thing I want to talk about are the rights that they are going to ask for. The rights that book author or that screenwriter or that movie studio, what are the things that they're going to want you to greenlight? And what are some things to know about those rights that they're going to ask for? And two of the key rights that people are prone to ask for in these situations that I think are definitely worth considering are fictionalization and adaptation. So let's take fictionalization first. So if someone's approaching you and they want to buy the rights to your life story, there's a good chance they're going to want also the right to fictionalize it, to jazz it up, throw in some extra details, take some artistic license, make it a little more interesting. And that is something for you to think about. Are you willing to agree to fictionalization or not? Now, again, they don't necessarily need your permission, but if you are in a position where you are negotiating this type of a deal, that is something to think about. Now, fictionalization could actually cast you in a better light than you really truly were in your real life, or it could cast you in a less flattering light than you think you maybe deserve. I'm thinking about the movie The Greatest Showman with Hugh Jackman. It's loosely, very loosely, based on the story of P.T. Barnum. And a lot of people criticized the film because they said that it made P.T. Barnum look a lot better and a lot more virtuous and a lot more ethical than he actually was in real life. This was a common complaint about the film. I think I saw one article that was like, great movie, but P.T. Barnum is not the hero that you want him to be, something to that effect. This is a very common criticism. So you might agree to fictionalization, and it might actually make you look a lot better, potentially, than you were in real life. Now, on the flip side, you could agree to fictionalization, and it could make you look not so good. And the movie I'm thinking about here is The Social Network, which is kind of loosely based on Mark Zuckerberg and his journey with Facebook, and it does not cast him in a very good light. So fictionalization could make you look better. It could make you look not so good, but that's a choice for you to make, whether you are willing to sign off on that or not. And the second thing that they're likely to ask for is the ability to adapt your life story into multiple formats. So they might not just want the rights to make it into a movie. They might also want the rights to make it into a musical, a book, a podcast, to make merchandise, to do all the things. And at first, it might seem attractive. This is a one-stop shop, one transaction, one sale. get it done, why not? But the reality is that, whoever you're selling to might really only have one lane that they're good at. A movie studio might be excellent at making films, but they're not excellent at making musicals because that's not their lane. So if you decide to sell off all of those rights, all of those formats as one package to one entity, there's a good chance that they're going to make the thing they're good at and then just sit on the rest of those rights and never actually use them. So maybe you sell off your life rights to a movie studio in every possible format, and they make the movie, and that's it. They never really do anything else with it. And 10 years later, someone approaches you and they want to use your life story and make it into a musical. Well, now those rights are tied up with somebody else, and they're tied up with someone who is realistically never going to exercise them. So what's that? That's a lost business opportunity for you, lost revenue for you. It's a loss for you because someone is sitting on the rights and they're realistically never going to use them. So 2 things to think about: adaptation, or multiple formats. It could be phrased a lot of different ways, and fictionalization. Those are things that a person buying your life story is likely going to want and ask for. And so it's something that you need to think about, whether you are okay with that or not. Now, the fourth and last point that I want to cover is, what if the movie gets made, the musical's on Broadway, the book gets published, and you don't like it? You do not like the finished product. You don't like how it makes you look. You feel that it exceeds what you agreed to. What do you do? Or is there anything that you can do? Now, like I said, lawsuits over entertainment that is inspired by, based on, pulled from true stories tend to produce a good number of lawsuits. This happens all the time. But what is also true is that these lawsuits are usually not successful. And that's because movies, books, musicals, all of these creative things are protected under the First Amendment. They are creative expression, and they are protected under the First Amendment, which protects the freedom of expression. So these lawsuits happen all the time. They are usually unsuccessful. And one of the reasons they are usually unsuccessful is because people try to make that argument we talked about at the beginning of this episode. They basically try to say, hey, they copied my life story without asking. And as you now know, because you listened to this episode, there is no copyright ownership in facts. There is no copyright ownership in just straight history. And many lawsuits fail because at the end of the day, they're really trying to make some variation of that argument. Now, just because most of these lawsuits fail, because these types of creative projects are protected by the First Amendment, that doesn't mean that there can't be other angles that are more effective, like breach of contract, violation of the right of publicity, or defamation if they actually say something about you that is untrue. So there can be alternative legal strategies that are more effective, but this really goes back to the very beginning and negotiating the original agreement. And so if you negotiate a better deal on the front end, you are more likely to end up happier on the back end. And if you end up unhappy, it's important to have a good, solid legal strategy and legal team to then pursue that claim. Because, like I said, people really try to argue they copied me, they copied my life, and that does not work. It's super common to try to go that route, but it fails pretty much every time. Okay, this was a lot of information, and those are the 4 points that I had to share with you guys. But I think this is such an interesting topic. I love, movies, musicals, all of it based on or pulled from life stories. I love the musical Hamilton. I love the movie Erin Brockovich and so many others. And I think it's such an interesting thing to think about. Maybe you have a life story that's really compelling. Maybe you have a life story that one day people will be going to the theaters to see. And I just think that's such an interesting thing to think about. And hopefully this has been helpful for you if you are either already in that place or if you are considering what it would look like to sell the rights to your life story. As always, thank you guys so much for being here. I appreciate you, and I will see you next time. Bye. Hey, thanks for listening to the show. The Legal Upgrade Podcast is a Bevel Law production. For more information about the Legal Upgrade, you can follow on Instagram at Bevel Law or find even more information on the website bevellaw.com. If you enjoyed the episode, please remember to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. See you next time on the Legal Upgrade Podcast.